Democrats are heading toward midterms on a losing streak. The likely death of Biden's Build Back Better plan puts a halt on social spending programs in addition to more failed bedrock promises like raising the national minimum wage, canceling student debt, and more. Journalist and founder of the Daily Poster, David Sirota, goes even further to say the Dems are trying to lose next year's contests.
And though Manchin and Sinema may be easy to point the finger at over Build Back Better, this administration's low approval ratings and loss of Latino voters could all come to a head come November. Team Rising is here to weigh in. Colin Rogero is a Democratic strategist. Rena Shah is a former Republican strategist and an advisor at the Renew Democracy Initiative. Colin, I don't go as far as Sirota in saying that they're actively trying to lose. But if they were actively trying to lose, to me, this is exactly how you would design it, isn't it?
I think it's pretty close. I think what Democrats have to come to terms with is the job of being in Congress and being in control of both the Senate, the House, and the presidency is more than just legislating. Okay, it's actually communicating. And this is where at the top, very top of the chain at the White House, they've fallen down, right? And I think they've just lost perspective as to where we came from, what people are paying attention to, and where we are now. And what I mean by that is we went from an absolute carnival barker who was president, who didn't actually do all that much, but everybody thought he did great things. So he was out there saying all the stuff that he thought he was going to do, but actually never accomplished. Democrats actually have some accomplishments to talk about. They're just doing a horrible job about communicating what they've done and who it's going to affect and how it's going to help people. And no, I don't think it is a foregone conclusion the Democrats are going to lose, but they have to realize the game that they're in. And just communicating about what you've done 4 weeks, 6 weeks before an election is a losing strategy nowadays. Republicans, our counterparts, our competition, are communicating all the time about what they want to do, what they think the White House and Congress has done bad, and we don't have a voice in opposition to that. And we need to correct that immediately if we're going to win not only in 2022, but in 2024 and for the future, for the foreseeable future.
Rena, is this an issue of the Democrats trying to do everything at once? Obviously, if you put all your eggs in one basket and then, Joe Manchin says no, you get nothing, rather than trying to work on maybe smaller things, I don't know, maybe child tax credit, something like that, you could get some Republican support on, or is that just naive now because Republicans are going to oppose anything Democrats put on the table and vice versa, and we live in zero-sum times and that's it?
We've been living in zero-sum times for a long time. I mean, I was on the Hill, 15 years ago and watching the same kind of shenanigans, although they've gotten much worse. Partisanship is much worse. But Robbie, you bring up a great point, and I'm wondering if we have ESP, because I've been thinking about this all weekend long. I've been asked to talk about Senator Joe Manchin from my home state. Of course, I made my career in Republican politics, but I've known Senator Manchin for about 20 years, back when he was not even in the governor's mansion and was just a state executive. I've watched the guy. I think if you ask me what he's doing in terms of his opposition to Build Back Better, I'll say this. I really do believe that this is about his legacy. For him, this is about massive spending bills in Washington having become the norm, about shoving every ideological desire that somebody has into a big bill and just saying, let's get this through, let's ram this through, let's subvert the process. That's something that concerns me about democracy. AOC really scared me this past week. And look, I think in general, I have a lot of policy differences with her, but it's rare that she really terrifies me. And this was the part that terrified me. She's like, let's take off the kid gloves. We've got all these tools at our disposal and we have not used them properly. So now we need to ram things through, basically is what she said. And that is, to me, again, anti-democratic. It's scary because with the precedent it sets for the future, ramming things through is not in general what the American public wants or needs. And when I say needs, I mean, this is always about elections, right? 2022 is on our mind. And let's think about how the average American takes information from Washington. Oftentimes they're not very plugged in. And what makes it worse is when they think these big things are happening and they're happening in the dark of night or they're too complex to understand. So breaking things out, I think, would have served the Democrats far better if to just piecemeal it out over the course of the year instead of, again, like I said, shoving every ideological desire and then saying that guy over there is killing democracy. It's on the shoulders of one man and one woman from West Virginia and Arizona. Now, the Hill does great reporting. There are great articles out every day that tell tell me which seats are in play or how this is strategically going to be done. I mean, you don't have to be a political analyst to know that there are narrow majorities, right, in both chambers. And this is obviously an advantage for the Republicans. They keep screaming red wave, but it's the messaging, as my fellow panelist Colin just said. It's about communication. Democrats never go for the jugular properly. And this time, I think they've screwed themselves by, again, making a huge, big bill that people just don't know what's in it.
But Colin, Rena's point there strikes to me at the heart of how broken our conception of democracy is. The idea that a party would be elected to control the White House and Congress and then implement an agenda that it ran on is seen as anti-democratic. And if that's the case, then what even is our system of government here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what Rena said, there's an important thing what Rena said. She said that things are rammed through and that seems anti-democratic. Well, yeah, I agree. I think we all as Americans probably agree with that. But the problem is for 20 years, things have been rammed through. OK, it's not that, there's all of a sudden, aside from at the bare minimum, raising the debt ceiling so we don't default on our debt, we generally don't do anything in a bipartisan way except maybe declare war, which is really pretty sad if you think about it.
And which we haven't done in almost 100 years.
Well, or start unending wars.
Right, and spend money on war. Right, exactly.
Exactly. And look, I think, Democrats need to get ahead of the messaging train here. And whether or not the bill is too big or too small or should be piecemealed, I think is a legislative strategy argument. I think a lot of voters like what is in the bill. They just don't have any idea what's in there. And that is actually part of the problem. And I think could we get around to explaining to people what's actually in these bills, then we would have more public support. There would be more wins for the White House. And people like Joe Manchin would feel actual public pressure to get on board with these things because you're winning. You're saying, people say, oh man, I love that bill. That's going to help me in this way. It's going to help me with childcare. It's going to help me with student loan debt, which we, talked about before. It's going to help me with things that actually impact my life. It's not just crazy Washington spending, but we have to explain that to people. And then when they like it, they'll pressure their leaders to actually vote for it. And that's where we've missed the connection here. We thought it's all a legislative strategy, and it's more than that.
If I can make a point there real quick about that, and I think, again, there's a lot we agree on here, Colin. I think one thing that really concerns me is now coal miners in my home state of West Virginia are forcing Joe Manchin's hand, sort of, hey, buddy, vote for this thing. There's black lung benefits in there. What is that doing in there with, like, everything else? You can agree with so much of what's in Build Back Better, which I actually do. I like a lot of what's in there. I would have liked it pieced out because the fact that these coal miners have to say, hey, this has our black lung benefits in it, please vote for it, and everything else, to me signals the fact that we now have governance by coalition rather than governance by negotiation. And it's an alarming trend that I think, again, is anti-democratic. It's not the fact that the party elected on a platform is trying to, exercise its ability to deliver on those promises that they campaigned on, but it's the fact that how we legislate is becoming so foreign to Americans that they're becoming increasingly disattached and increasingly apathetic.
Well, I would say to that, Rena, one thing, and I actually think you're right. The problem that Democrats have in passing that kind of legislation is we are a coalition party, and we have a lot of differing views. And in order to get any piece of legislation passed, we have to make large-scale negotiations with all of these kind of fighting wings of the party. So we end up with bills that have a lot of stuff in it because that's the only way it has a chance of actually getting through. So yeah, I wish we could piecemeal it out, but the chances of that actually passing in, under a Democratic House and Senate are probably equally low as a big bill. So you might as well take the risk with the big bill.
Right. And also you can't do it without getting rid of the filibuster. That's why they had to put it all into reconciliation, and they didn't have the votes to get rid of the filibuster, and so here we are. So anyway, Colin and Rena, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.